There are moments in history where silence feels heavier than any truth ever spoken. Great empires rise, vanish, and are rewritten as myths. The stones of ancient cities whisper of things that no record dares to name, eras erased not by time alone, but by intent. Beneath every polished artifact in a museum lies a fracture in memory, a secret buried under centuries of curated amnesia. Somewhere between geology and theology, between myth and mechanism, humanity seems to have misplaced itself. Entire civilizations, older than what history books will ever admit, have left traces. Megaliths aligned to impossible stars, maps that predate the continent's current shapes, and stories too consistent across cultures to be dismissed as coincidence. What if the history we know is not merely incomplete, but deliberately edited? What if the world before the flood, before the reset, held technologies and truths incompatible with the narrative we were meant to inherit? The forbidden truths of our past are not gone. They are hidden in the cracks of stone, in the margins of ancient texts, in the silence between one cataclysm and the next. Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it for you right now? I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. In the dim corridors of time, where written memory dissolves into myth, there lingers a question that refuses to fade. Why does so much of humanity's early story feel erased? Archaeologists dig through layers of sediment and silence, uncovering civilizations that seem to have appeared out of nowhere, fully formed, sophisticated, and inexplicably aligned to the heavens. The Sumerians, the first known authors of history, spoke of kings who ruled before the flood, reigns stretching tens of thousands of years, preserved on the clay of the weld Blundell prism. To the modern eye, these are myths. To the ancients, they were records. Between those two perceptions lies the great fracture of understanding. Every culture seems to echo a similar wound, a cataclysm, a cleansing, a time when knowledge was washed away. In the temple libraries of Mesopotamia, in the crumbling papyri of Egypt, in the songs of the Hopi and the Zulu, there exists a shared grief, a memory of something vast that once was and is no more. Scholars call it collective myth. But myths are not born from emptiness. They are fossils of truth, softened by the tides of time. Somewhere behind these recurring stories, of floods, sky gods, golden ages, there may lie an event or a system so ancient it outlived its own evidence. When modern science brushed against these tales, it called them coincidence. Yet coincidence rarely carves temples from solid granite or aligns monoliths to the precise precession of the equinoxes. Sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, carbon-dated to nearly 12,000 years ago, force historians to pause. Here stands architecture far older than agriculture, intricate and deliberate, built by people who were not supposed to know geometry, astronomy, or organized worship. Someone, or something, taught them, or perhaps they remembered. But remembered from where? Every timeline humanity accepts begins neatly after 4000 BCE, when writing emerged in Sumer. Before that, we are told, there were only hunters, gatherers, nomads beneath a simpler sky. Yet, if one looks closer, the earth itself protests. Beneath the ice cores of Greenland lie signatures of cosmic dust. Beneath the Sahara sands, radar imaging reveals buried river systems and the outlines of vanished cities. Something happened, a turning, a resetting. It is as though civilization bloomed before its time, was abruptly silenced, and then bloomed again, weaker, as though waking from amnesia. Some believe this silence was carved by nature, a comet, a solar flare, a shift of the poles. Others whisper of intervention, not divine, but deliberate. In the aftermath of every ancient disaster, a priesthood or empire rises to rewrite what survived. The Library of Alexandria burned, not once but several times, each flame erasing centuries of accumulated human memory. The Mayan codices, hundreds of them, were fed to Spanish fires under the belief that no truth outside Scripture should remain. The pattern repeats. What threatens the narrative must disappear. Even in Europe, the transition from the classical to the medieval world came with a quiet purge. The works of Anaximander, who spoke of worlds before ours, vanished. The mechanical blueprints of Hero of Alexandria, describing steam engines 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution, were lost until fragments resurfaced. What hand keeps removing the same pieces from history's puzzle? Perhaps not a single hand, but a principle. Control through narrative. If knowledge defines power, then the past itself becomes a battlefield. Consider the strange uniformity of forgotten technology. Massive stones weighing hundreds of tons, cut with precision modern tools struggle to replicate, appear in places continents apart. The polygonal masonry of Sacsayhuaman in Peru mirrors the stone joints of Mycenae in Greece. The pyramids of Giza and the platform of Baalbek share impossible alignments. How could cultures separated by oceans share such architectural DNA? Mainstream archaeology attributes it to parallel invention, coincidence again. But what if the blueprint was older, pre-cataclysmic, and the survivors merely rebuilt fragments of what they once knew? The earth bears scars that hint at a story beyond written memory. Around 12,800 years ago, a sudden cold snap known as the Younger Dryas struck. Ice cores and sediment layers suggest a global catastrophe. Temperatures plummeted, megafauna died out, and sea levels rose more than 100 meters as glaciers melted. To mainstream science, this marks the end of the Pleistocene. To myth, it was the Great Flood. The Sumerians called it the deluge sent by the gods. Plato spoke of Atlantis, swallowed by the sea. The Aztec remembered Atonatia, the age of water. Each culture named the same scar differently, and when the waters receded, the survivors began again, carrying fragments of an older world that no longer fit the new one. It is here the veil thickens. Why, after this reset, does the record resume so suddenly with fully formed civilizations? Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, each with writing, astronomy, legal codes, and monumental architecture? If humanity truly had to start over from scratch, such coherence seems improbable. Unless the survivors preserved what they could, encoded in myth, geometry, and ritual, until it could be rebuilt. The flood may have cleansed the earth, but not memory. Memory persisted in symbol, waiting for rediscovery. Yet rediscovery comes with resistance. Each time a new anomaly threatens the official timeline, it is dismissed, ridiculed, or quietly ignored. The Baghdad battery, suggesting ancient electrochemical knowledge, the Antikythera mechanism, a gear-based computer from the 2nd century BCE, the Piri Reis map, showing the Antarctic coast centuries before its discovery, all are labeled curiosities rather than evidence. The story must remain linear, primitive to advanced, dark to enlightened. But nature does not move in straight lines. It cycles. So does civilization. Some researchers, like Graham Hancock or Dr. Robert Schoch, have suggested that ancient structures such as the Sphinx bear water erosion far older than dynastic Egypt allows. If true, this pushes the monument's age back thousands of years, perhaps into that lost epoch before the Younger Dryas. Their work provokes fierce rejection, not always from lack of merit, but from fear. Fear that a rewritten timeline would unravel the foundations of modern academia and belief. For to admit an earlier high civilization is to confront the possibility that we are not the first intelligent species to walk this earth. Imagine, then, that history is not a book, but a palimpsest, a manuscript written over older text, the traces of which still bleed through. Each empire, religion, and scientific age scratches its version atop the last, insisting it is the first, the pure, the true. But under ultraviolet light, the older ink reappears. Those buried truths are the forbidden strata of human memory, fragments of a story where gods were not metaphors, but teachers, where cataclysms were not divine wrath, but recurring resets in a planetary rhythm, where humanity, time after time, ascended, forgot, and began again. The deeper question is not what was lost, but who ensured it stayed that way. Could it be that our collective amnesia serves a purpose? A species that forgets its cycles is easier to shepherd. Every rediscovery, whether of forgotten science or forbidden scripture, reopens a window to self-knowledge, and with it, disobedience. When knowledge decentralizes, power trembles. Thus, the guardians of orthodoxy, be they temples, thrones, or laboratories, enforce a singular narrative, one past, one progress, one truth. Anything older, greater, or cyclical must be myth. But myths remember. They carry what history erases. And so the whispers persist, in Sumerian tablets, in Vedic hymns, in the corridors beneath Giza, in the half-translated codices locked away in museum vaults. Every age believes it is the first to awaken, yet beneath its feet lie the ruins of others that thought the same. As night falls over the ruins of forgotten worlds, one cannot help but wonder if our own civilization is simply another chapter in that repeating book, rising, shining, and awaiting its turn to be erased. The stars have seen it all before. The only question left is, who will remember us when the next tide comes? The further one peers into the past, the more the edges blur. History becomes less a line and more a fog, a place where myths and measurements overlap. Somewhere within that haze lies the question that has haunted every seeker since the first spade struck ancient soil: who or what came before us? For every artifact uncovered, there seems to exist another that should not exist at all. Anomalies whisper from beneath centuries of dust, refusing to fit neatly within the official chronology. And it is within those whispers that the story of the hidden past begins to breathe. Consider the Sumerian king list again, a document that calmly declares kings ruled for tens of thousands of years before the flood. To modern historians, these reigns are poetic exaggerations. Yet the same list abruptly shifts to more plausible lifespans after the cataclysm, as though the world itself had been recalibrated. What changed? Why did divine years suddenly become mortal? Perhaps it was not metaphor, but measurement. The record of a civilization whose time flowed differently, whose calendar followed celestial rhythms now forgotten. In the ruins of Eridu and Nippur, Archaeologists unearthed tablets describing beings called the Anunnaki, those who descended from the heavens. Mainstream interpretation calls them gods, personifications of natural forces. But across the ancient world, similar figures appear. The Apkallu of Mesopotamia, the Nephilim of the Hebrew texts, the Watchers of Enoch, the Shining Ones of the Maya. Always the same theme: teachers from the sky, bearers of knowledge, punished or forgotten when humanity turned against them. Could it be that these stories preserve not fantasy, but memory? A faint echo of contact between species or between cycles of civilization, one teaching the next before vanishing into the floodwaters of myth? Ancient Egypt adds another riddle to this tapestry. Its earliest dynasties appear suddenly, complete with hieroglyphic writing, mathematics, and astronomy. There is no clear developmental stage, no slow evolution from primitive culture. The pyramid texts, among the oldest religious writings on Earth, speak of the Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods ruled and knowledge descended from the stars. Egyptologists dismiss this as creation myth, yet the architecture of the Giza Plateau seems to encode star alignments from a time far older than dynastic Egypt. The Great Pyramid's shafts point to Orion's belt and Sirius as they appeared around 10,500 BCE, the same epoch when the Sphinx may have faced torrential rains. Coincidence, again? Or the residue of an epoch before the reset, remembered in stone when paper would not suffice? Across the ocean, the same fingerprints reappear. The megaliths of Puma Punku in Bolivia, carved with precision to the 1,000th of an inch, seem engineered rather than chiseled. Their T-shaped blocks interlock like components of a machine, their magnetic orientation consistent with advanced knowledge of metallurgy and magnetism. And yet, official archaeology attributes them to a culture without the wheel, iron tools, or written language. It is as though we are looking at the remains of a civilization that inherited something it could no longer fully understand. When cultures forget their origins, they sanctify them. The gods become metaphors, the technologies become miracles, a forgotten science becomes religion, a lost memory becomes faith. Somewhere in that transformation lies the mechanism of control, because whoever defines the myth defines the world. After each cataclysm, when survivors rebuild, they also rewrite. The new priesthood takes hold of the remnants and shapes them into a doctrine that preserves authority. The deeper truths, the mechanisms of energy, astronomy, consciousness, fade into allegory. What was once knowledge becomes belief, and belief is far easier to govern. Even within the records that survived, fragments resist suppression. The Greek philosopher Plato wrote of Atlantis not as fantasy, but as history told to Solon by Egyptian priests, an empire destroyed by water 9,000 years before his time. His description matches the geological evidence of a sudden sea level rise and a global flood. Modern scholars call it allegory. But why would the Egyptians, meticulous keepers of cosmic order, invent a parable of destruction unless it carried truth? If the world has indeed suffered cycles of erasure, Atlantis was merely one chapter of many, a high civilization undone by its own pride, leaving warnings we chose to mythologize rather than heed. The same message surfaces in the Vedas, which describe yugas, ages of rise and decay, each ending in catastrophe, only to begin anew. Hindu cosmology speaks of civilizations that flourished under higher consciousness before falling into ignorance. The concept mirrors the precession of the equinoxes, a cosmic clock ticking through epochs of light and darkness. Could these myths be a coded remembrance of recurring cycles, where human advancement waxed and waned with planetary rhythms? The further science progresses, the more its discoveries echo the forgotten philosophies of antiquity. Quantum theory, for instance, now wrestles with the idea that consciousness may shape reality, a notion long central to ancient metaphysics. What we call modern breakthroughs may simply be rediscoveries of what was once known and then erased. Every rediscovery challenges the narrative, and with it, the authority of those who built their empires upon it. When we examine who benefits from forgetting, a pattern emerges. Institutions, religious, academic, political, thrive on continuity, not disruption. To preserve order, they require a linear, digestible story of progress. Chaos is forbidden, so when evidence arises that humanity's past may not be a straight line from cave to cosmos, it must be buried. Consider how early archaeology treated anomalies. The Baghdad battery locked away, the Saqqara bird labeled a toy, the 2.1 billion-year-old Klerksdorp spheres dismissed as natural oddities despite their geometric perfection. Knowledge that does not fit is not studied. It is archived into obscurity. In the early 20th century, researchers like Charles Hapgood proposed the theory of crustal displacement, suggesting entire continents may have shifted rapidly, explaining ancient maps showing Antarctica ice-free. Einstein himself corresponded with Hapgood, intrigued but cautious. Today, his letters remain archived, rarely mentioned. A radical idea that could connect geology, myth, and archaeology, silenced by convenience. To acknowledge it would mean admitting the world's surface has rewritten itself many times, erasing civilizations as effortlessly as tides erase footprints. Even language carries traces of the forgotten. Across the world, ancient tongues share root syllables for light, sky, and knowledge. The Sumerian An, the Egyptian Ra, the Sanskrit Surya, different yet resonant. Linguists call it coincidence. Mystics call it memory. Perhaps the first language, before Babel, encoded concepts now beyond translation. Perhaps what we call gods were once teachers of frequency, vibration, or resonance, a science turned sacred through misinterpretation. Every fragment points to a larger design, a global memory fractured and scattered. Megalithic architecture aligns to the same celestial geometry across continents. Myths recount identical deluges, and every ancient priesthood claims descent from a golden age. Yet the further we investigate, the more modern scholarship insists on compartmentalization. Egypt belongs to Egyptologists, Sumer to Assyriologists, the Andes to anthropologists. The walls of specialization prevent anyone from seeing the full mosaic. The truth remains hidden not in the dark, but in plain sight, fragmented across disciplines, languages, and dogmas. And still, the Earth remembers. Satellite imaging reveals patterns invisible to the naked eye, networks of geometric alignments linking sacred sites across thousands of miles. Giza to Easter Island, Angkor Wat to Nazca, all arranged along great circles that mirror planetary energy lines once described in ancient Chinese and Vedic cosmology. Science calls them coincidence. The ancients called them ley lines, meridians of the Earth's life force. If these alignments were intentional, then our ancestors understood the planet not as a rock, but as a living organism, a consciousness interwoven with our own. Perhaps that was the forbidden truth, that humanity was once integrated into the rhythms of the cosmos, not separate from it. To reclaim that knowledge would dissolve hierarchies built upon separation between man and nature, science and spirit, ruler and ruled. The forgetting, then, was not just historical. It was spiritual, a disconnection cultivated to ensure obedience. The deeper one follows these threads, the clearer it becomes that the hidden past is not simply a mystery of archaeology. It is a mirror. Each anomaly reflects what modern civilization chooses not to see, that progress without memory is illusion, and knowledge without humility is destruction, waiting to repeat itself. Somewhere in the depths of forgotten archives, perhaps in a monastery or a locked museum basement, lies the fragment that could rewrite everything. A single artifact, a text, or an inscription that confirms what the myths have been trying to tell us all along, that we are not the beginning. We are the continuation. But if such evidence were found, if the forbidden truth emerged into daylight, would humanity be ready to face it? Or would it burn again, as Alexandria did, in the fire of denial? The silence of the past is not absence, it is protection. Perhaps what is hidden remains hidden not because it was lost, but because it is not yet time to remember. And when that time comes, when the veil thins once more, the question will return like a tide against forgotten shores. Who were the first to awaken? And who decided we should forget? Every civilization that ever rose to greatness seems to carry within its ruins a single haunting paradox. The older the structure, the higher the sophistication. As archaeologists dig deeper, the craftsmanship becomes more advanced, not less. The Great Pyramid of Giza, perfectly aligned to true north within a fraction of a degree, precedes the pyramids that followed, which grow increasingly imprecise. The temples of Baalbek rest upon stone blocks weighing over 1,000 tons, far beyond the mechanical limits of the Roman engineers who later built upon them. In South America, the oldest layers of Tiwanaku and Pumapunku reveal machining marks invisible to the eye, yet measurable under magnification. It is as though humanity began at a peak of knowledge and has been descending ever since. Official history resists this conclusion, insisting on progress through accumulation. But the evidence seems inverted. The further back one looks, the more one encounters inexplicable mastery, geometry, acoustics, astronomical alignment, even seismic resistance, achieved without the tools we now consider essential. Perhaps the ancients built differently, not because they lacked technology, but because they used a form of it that modern science no longer recognizes. A forgotten science of resonance, of sound and vibration, hinted at in legends, but dismissed as metaphor. Ancient texts seem to remember fragments of this knowledge. The Rig Veda speaks of chariots of the gods that sang through the air. The Egyptian Shabaka stone describes creation emerging through the voice of Ta, the Word made form. The Bible's walls of Jericho fell to sound. Pythagoras taught that harmony was the architecture of the cosmos. And yet, across millennia, such teachings were reclassified as mysticism, stripped of their empirical essence. What if they were not metaphors for faith, but recollections of physics, a technology of frequency, where sound could move stone and thought could shape matter? In the heart of Egypt's temples, one can still feel the pulse of such knowledge. The resonant chambers of the Great Pyramid respond to specific frequencies, producing vibrations that amplify rather than echo. Acoustic engineers who have studied them report phenomena difficult to explain with simple architecture. The geometry seems designed to generate standing waves, patterns that concentrate energy in predictable nodes. If such a system existed, it might explain how ancient builders lifted and placed stones that modern cranes can barely budge. Not magic, not miracle, just a science older than memory, now entombed beneath dogma. But how does such knowledge vanish? The answer may lie in the cycles of destruction that reset humanity's clock. Geological evidence reveals that roughly every 12,000 years, Earth experiences sudden, violent upheavals, magnetic shifts, volcanic outbursts, and floods capable of erasing entire continents. The last such event corresponds to the Younger Dryas, when sea levels rose abruptly, swallowing coastlines where civilizations may once have thrived. If an advanced culture had existed then, one capable of planetary engineering or energy manipulation, it would have been buried, leaving only fragments for later ages to misinterpret as myth. Yet not all memory perished. Around the world, sacred traditions preserve blueprints of cosmic order. The Dogon of Mali speak of the star Sirius B, invisible to the naked eye, yet described in detail long before telescopes. The Maya tracked the precession of Venus with uncanny precision. The builders of Stonehenge and Nabta Playa oriented their monuments to solstices and lunar cycles with mathematical accuracy. These are not the efforts of primitive stargazers, but the remnants of a knowledge system obsessed with cosmic resonance. Perhaps their temples and megaliths functioned not as places of worship, but as instruments, machines built to harmonize with Earth's electromagnetic field. If that is true, then the suppression of such ideas was not accidental. Throughout history, whenever a rediscovery threatened to bridge science and spirit, it was quickly silenced. The Hermetic texts of Alexandria, which claimed that as above, so below, governed both cosmos and atom, were declared heretical. Nikola Tesla's vision of wireless global energy, an echo of that same principle, was dismantled under political pressure and financial sabotage. Knowledge that unites rather than divides, that frees rather than binds, has always been the most forbidden. Because to understand it would mean to understand power, the kind that needs no intermediary. Even now, fragments of that forbidden science emerge like fossils from a forgotten epoch. In 1969, Apollo 12 astronauts struck the moon's surface and recorded it reverberating like a bell, suggesting a hollow or partially metallic structure beneath its crust. The finding was quietly filed under anomalies. In the 1970s, Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Shcherbakov published a paper proposing that the moon might be an artificial satellite, captured or constructed in deep prehistory. The idea was swiftly dismissed as fantasy, but the data remains curious. Precise orbital stability, density anomalies, and the way lunar craters have shallow, uniform depth, as if their surface conceals an inner shell. If true, the implications reach far beyond planetary science. It would mean that the architects of the ancient world, those who aligned temples, tracked celestial cycles, and spoke of gods descending from the sky, may have been describing something literal. The possibility that humanity's origins intertwine with celestial engineering blurs the line between archaeology and cosmology. Ancient monuments across Earth seem to encode astronomical constants. The Great Pyramid's dimensions mirror the ratio of Earth's circumference to the Moon's orbit. The Angkor complex reflects the constellation Draco. Teotihuacan reproduces the planetary distances of the inner solar system. Are these coincidences, or the remnants of a lost science of planetary harmonics? A recognition that Earth itself is part of a larger engineered symphony? If such knowledge once existed, who decided we should forget it? History offers clues. After every great age of illumination, an age of control follows. The fall of Babylon gave rise to empires ruled by divine right. The burning of Alexandria ensured that theology could reign unchallenged. During the Inquisition, manuscripts that bridged astronomy and alchemy were destroyed as threats to doctrine. Knowledge was centralized, first in temples, then in libraries, then in institutions. The custodians changed names, but their purpose remained constant, to gatekeep the narrative of origins. Yet, traces of defiance persist. In the Renaissance, artists like Leonardo da Vinci hid geometric codes within their paintings, preserving ratios and structures drawn from ancient mystery schools. In the 19th century, explorers like Augustus Le Plongeon and Ignatius Donnelly tried to link the ruins of the Old and New Worlds, suggesting a global progenitor civilization. They were ridiculed. Even today, independent researchers who propose connections between ancient sites are labeled pseudo-archaeologists, their findings buried under ridicule rather than review. But suppression does not erase truth. It only delays it. Modern technology, ironically, may become the key to unsealing what the ancients left behind. LiDAR scans have revealed vast hidden cities beneath the jungles of Cambodia and Guatemala. Seafloor mapping has uncovered massive geometric structures off the coasts of Japan and India, suggesting submerged architecture far older than recorded history. Artificial intelligence, now analyzing patterns across global datasets, is beginning to detect correlations invisible to human bias, alignments, ratios, and symmetries that imply coordination across vast distances and times. The more data we gather, the clearer the pattern becomes. Our ancestors were not isolated tribes. They were nodes in a forgotten global network. And if that network once existed, if the world was unified under a shared science of earth, sky, and sound, then the mystery is not just where it went, but who inherited it. Could the priesthoods of later ages, the Sumerian, the Egyptian, the Mesoamerican, have been fragments of a knowledge lineage stretching back to before the flood? Their rituals, chants, and symbols may be echoes of equations now forgotten. The Word of God may once have been literal resonance, an understanding that vibration creates reality. If this is the truth, then the greatest deception in human history is not the concealment of alien visitors or lost continents. It is the erasure of humanity's own potential. For to remember that once we knew how to harmonize with the cosmos is to realize that power has always been within us, and power within cannot be governed. As the stars wheel above, indifferent yet familiar, the ruins remain, silent equations written in stone. Perhaps they wait not for discovery, but for comprehension. The ancients built not monuments to the gods, but mirrors for us, hoping that one day we would look into their geometry and remember who we were before forgetting became tradition. And so the question lingers, like the echo of a bell struck on a distant moon. What if the purpose of history is not to record the past, but to hide it? Beneath the surface of accepted history lies another narrative, buried not only in the soil, but in the architecture of memory itself. It is a story of erasure, not by chance, not by time, but by design. For history is not merely a record of what happened, it is a construction of what was permitted to survive. Each empire, each institution, each orthodoxy has edited the human timeline, trimming away inconvenient truths until the remnants form a neat, linear story. And yet, the ruins resist that simplicity. They stand like scars, mute, immovable evidence that something older, greater, and deeply misunderstood once walked this earth. When one gazes upon the great monuments of antiquity, there's an unspoken tension between what is seen and what is believed. The stones at Giza, the walls of Sacsayhuaman, the terraces of Machu Picchu, the cyclopean foundations of Baalbek, each tells a story incompatible with the idea of primitive builders. Some blocks fit together so precisely that a blade of grass cannot pass between them. Others weigh hundreds of tons and rest upon each other as if set by invisible hands. These are not the works of superstition. They are the language of geometry and engineering, written in a dialect we no longer understand. Yet, when these anomalies surface, they are swiftly folded into the narrative of gradual evolution. Simple people, big dreams, rudimentary tools. To question that simplicity is to question the hierarchy of knowledge itself. For if ancient civilizations possessed technologies or sciences beyond our comprehension, it implies that progress is not linear but cyclical, and that our current age may not be the apex of human achievement, but merely its latest echo. That idea alone is enough to destabilize the entire structure of modern thought. The control of history has always been a form of power. During the medieval era, the Church held a monopoly on truth. Knowledge that did not fit its cosmology was branded heresy, punished by fire. Later, when science rose to prominence, it inherited the same instinct, different robes, same creed. The Church had excommunication, science has peer review. Both protect dogma under the guise of order, and both have buried evidence that threatened the narrative. From Giordano Bruno's heliocentric universe to the suppressed observations of early paleontologists who found human remains in strata too ancient to explain, the story is the same. Inconvenient data must be destroyed or ignored. In this light, the burning of the Library of Alexandria becomes more than a tragedy. It becomes a template. When knowledge accumulates beyond control, it must be erased. The same pattern reappears in the destruction of the Mayan codices, the pillaging of the Baghdad Museum, the censorship of unorthodox research in modern academia. Each flame that devours a record is a declaration. There are things humanity is not meant to remember, but who decides what must be forgotten and why? Perhaps it is not one hand, but a collective reflex, a survival instinct of systems built on hierarchy. Knowledge equalizes, ignorance stratifies. A population aware of its true origins would not submit easily to imposed authority. If ancient civilizations understood how consciousness, matter, and energy intertwine, then rediscovering that truth would dissolve the illusion of separation upon which modern power depends. That is the forbidden truth. Not that gods once walked among us, but that we once walked as gods ourselves, aware, attuned, ungovernable. Even fragments of that awareness threaten established order. In the early 20th century, G.I. Gurdjieff spoke of ancient science hidden in myth, a knowledge of vibration and balance capable of awakening dormant potential. His teachings were met with silence and ridicule. Around the same time, Nikola Tesla's experiments with resonance hinted at limitless, wireless energy drawn from the planet's natural frequencies. His Wardenclyffe Tower, if completed, could have rendered the power grid, and with it, economic control, obsolete. It was dismantled and his research confiscated. Knowledge, once again, disappeared into silence. The mechanism of suppression has evolved, but the logic remains constant. Today, data that challenges official narratives vanishes not in bonfires, but in algorithms. Search engines bury results, academic journals reject non-conforming studies, documentaries vanish from streaming platforms. The keepers of the story no longer wear crowns or robes. They wear neutrality, claiming to protect the truth while curating its boundaries. And in doing so, they ensure that humanity remains amnesiac, orbiting endlessly around half-remembered myths. But nature does not forget. Across the globe, geological anomalies hint at events that official history refuses to reconcile. The submerged ruins off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, appear to be artificial terraces carved before the last ice age. The Bimini Road in the Bahamas forms a pathway of megalithic blocks leading to nowhere, unless it once led to somewhere now underwater. Satellite scans of the Sahara reveal vast circular structures beneath the sand, resembling ancient city grids. If these are natural formations, they are the most organized accidents on Earth. Each new discovery stretches the boundary of accepted history, and each time the establishment retreats just far enough to absorb it without admitting the larger implication. It is a delicate dance between revelation and control. For to acknowledge that advanced civilizations existed before the flood is to admit that history as we know it is a reconstruction. A curated myth built atop ruins we no longer understand. The psychological effect of such concealment is profound. A species cut off from its origins becomes rootless, dependent on authority for meaning. Without memory, there is no identity. Without identity, no resistance. It is no accident that modern education teaches history as a straight road beginning with Mesopotamia and ending with modern democracy. Everything before that is labeled prehistory, as if to say there was nothing worth remembering. Yet the artifacts contradict this amnesia. They whisper of a time when humanity lived in rhythm with the cosmos, not in competition with it. A time when architecture, astronomy, and spirituality were one and the same. In the ancient world, knowledge was not written in books, but built into landscapes. Temples mirrored constellations, pyramids encoded mathematical constants, megaliths traced planetary cycles. These were not monuments, they were memory devices designed to endure when language failed. The ancients understood what we have forgotten, that stone does not burn, and perhaps that is why the controllers of knowledge now target perception rather than objects. To rewrite the mind is more efficient than to destroy the archive. There are moments when the veil slips, when explorers or independent researchers stumble upon truths too persistent to ignore. The narrative wavers. The discovery of the Antikythera mechanism, a complex analog computer from ancient Greece, shattered the assumption that ancient engineers lacked precision technology. The unearthing of the Baghdad battery suggested that electrochemical knowledge predated modern electricity by millennia. Each of these findings should have rewritten the textbooks, yet instead they were compartmentalized, turned into curiosities. The system allows anomalies, but never conclusions. The irony is that we are surrounded by the evidence we deny. The alignment of sacred sites along global geodesic grids, the recurrence of the same mathematical ratios, the golden mean, the pi constant, in structures built oceans apart, the persistence of flood myths and star knowledge in cultures that supposedly never met, all point toward a shared origin. And still, academia insists upon coincidence. It is as though humanity has been hypnotized into blindness, conditioned to accept disconnection as normal. Perhaps the guardians of the narrative are not merely protecting power, but protecting stability. What if the reemergence of forbidden knowledge threatens more than institutions? What if it threatens sanity itself? Imagine learning that civilization has risen and fallen countless times, each destroyed not by nature, but by its own arrogance. Imagine realizing that every empire, every ideology, every religion is just the latest iteration of the same forgotten cycle. Could the human psyche bear such knowledge? Or must the story remain hidden until we are ready to remember without repeating the mistake? Still, something in us resists the lie. We dig, we question, we dream of what came before. That instinct, the hunger for origins, is perhaps the oldest human impulse of all. And as the digital age scatters information faster than it can be censored, the forgotten patterns begin to reassemble themselves. The fragments, linguistic, geological, mythological, start to cohere. The shape of an older truth flickers beneath the noise, like the ghost of a civilization awakening in the collective unconscious. If there truly was an age before recorded time, if humanity once mastered technologies of sound, light, and consciousness, then perhaps the secret was never lost, only hidden until we matured enough to rediscover it. But to reach it, we must confront the architecture of deception built around us, the layers of comfort that keep us asleep. And so the question remains, pulsing quietly beneath the static of modern life. What would happen if we remembered? What if the walls between myth and memory dissolved, and the true timeline unfolded before us? Not a line, but a spiral, repeating endlessly, waiting for us to awaken before the next fall. The ruins wait, the stones still sing, but it is not their voice that must rise, it is ours. There is a strange melancholy that surrounds the ruins of the ancient world, a silence that feels less like absence and more like restraint. It is the quiet of something once alive, now buried under layers of narrative, politics, and fear. For the deeper one looks into the archaeology of truth, the clearer it becomes that what is hidden is not merely the past, it is intention. Every fragment that challenges the official chronology seems to vanish into archives, private collections, or the gray zones of classified research. Somewhere between science and secrecy lies the forbidden bridge connecting ancient knowledge to modern power. The 19th century was an age of rediscovery and revision. When explorers unearthed strange relics across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Mesoamerica, they did not find the primitive beginnings of civilization as expected. They found sophistication, astronomical alignments, mathematical precision, and myths describing celestial engineering. But these discoveries arrived at a time when the West needed history to justify empire. To claim dominion over the present, it needed to own the past. And so archaeology became a tool of control, a way to translate other civilizations through the lens of European superiority. Anything that contradicted the narrative of linear progress was dismissed as superstition or coincidence. The timeline was set. The dawn of humanity began where empire demanded it to begin, yet anomalies refused to cooperate. In 1909, a report in the Arizona Gazette described the discovery of a massive underground complex in the Grand Canyon filled with Egyptian-style artifacts and hieroglyphs. The Smithsonian denied any knowledge. Decades later, artifacts from South America resembling Phoenician and Egyptian motifs surfaced, only to disappear into private hands. In China's Bayan Kara Ula caves, archaeologists found discs inscribed with microscopic spiral patterns that told of beings who came from the clouds. The discs, too, were locked away. Whether authentic or not, these stories share a common outcome: silence. Not explanation, not investigation. Silence. Why is it that whenever evidence emerges suggesting an interconnected ancient world, it vanishes behind institutional walls? Perhaps the truth is not that these artifacts are too strange to believe, but too dangerous to allow. For they suggest that history is not a story of isolated civilizations, but of a global network that predates our known record, one that may have possessed technologies rivaling or surpassing our own. If that is so, then the question becomes, where did that knowledge go, and who inherited it? Whispers of hidden lineages persist through secret societies and esoteric traditions. The Freemasons trace their origin to the builders of Solomon's Temple. The Rosicrucians claim descent from Egyptian mystery schools. The Templars, before their destruction by the Church, were accused of worshipping forbidden symbols linked to ancient fertility cults. These threads, woven through centuries of secrecy, all lead back to one idea: that fragments of the pre-flood knowledge survived, not in libraries or temples, but in coded rituals, geometry, and bloodlines. In the Renaissance, these echoes resurfaced through architecture and art. Cathedrals across Europe mirrored the sacred geometry of earlier ages: the golden ratio, the vesica piscis, the alignment of light and sound within stone chambers. Builders were called masters, not merely for their skill, but for their guardianship of symbolic knowledge. Each arch, each stained glass window encoded cosmic principles inherited from Sumer, Egypt, and beyond. And yet, the church that employed them also feared them, for their craft whispered of truths outside Scripture, truths that placed divinity not in heaven, but in human consciousness itself. The suppression of such ideas has always been cloaked in moral language: heresy, blasphemy, pseudoscience. But beneath that rhetoric lies the same motive: control. Knowledge of our forgotten past threatens the architecture of obedience. It invites the question no ruler can afford: if we once possessed higher wisdom, why do we kneel now? If humanity's potential was once limitless, who chose to chain it? The modern age, draped in the authority of science, believes itself immune to such manipulation. Yet the mechanisms remain the same. Discoveries that destabilize the established order are buried beneath ridicule, bureaucracy, or the endless noise of distraction. When evidence arises that the Sphinx may predate Egypt's dynasties, funding disappears. When astronomers note the impossible alignments of ancient monuments with lunar and stellar cycles, the studies are dismissed as numerology. When researchers propose that consciousness might play a role in physical reality, their work is relegated to fringe journals. The walls of orthodoxy are no longer stone. They are peer-reviewed, algorithmically enforced, and invisibly patrolled. Still, now and then, the veil flickers. Satellite mapping reveals lost cities beneath the Amazon canopy, vast enough to rival ancient Egypt. LIDAR scanning exposes geometric mounds across North America, civilizations older and more complex than textbooks admit. Genetic studies trace human origins not to a single cradle in Africa, but to multiple simultaneous lineages. The evidence grows, but so does the resistance. To rewrite history would mean rewriting identity, economy, even religion. Too many pillars would crumble. Perhaps the most profound question is not what we've forgotten, but why forgetting persists. Could it be that the cycles of remembering and erasing serve some deeper function? If humanity truly rises and falls in rhythmic epochs, each time reaching for the stars, then collapsing under its own weight, perhaps the guardians of knowledge suppress the past not from malice, but from fear. Fear that remember it too soon would invite another collapse. Every myth warns of it. Atlantis destroyed by pride, Babel shattered by ambition, Eden lost through the hunger for forbidden knowledge. Maybe the silence is not conspiracy, but quarantine. And yet, one cannot silence the earth itself. Its magnetic memory, its scars and fossils, its celestial patterns, all conspire to remind us that we have been here before. The rhythm of catastrophe is written into the planet's pulse. Ancient cultures spoke of great cycles, Maya Baktuns, Hindu yugas, Platonic years, each marking the rise and fall of ages. The last great cataclysm may have cleansed the world 12,000 years ago. Perhaps another draws near. If so, the suppression of memory serves an even darker purpose, to keep us unprepared. For a species that forgets its own cycles is doomed to repeat them. Even now, strange synchronicities arise. Global temperatures shift, ice melts, magnetic poles wander. The same geological signs that preceded ancient floods begin to echo. Myths once dismissed as allegory start to sound like warning. Could it be that those who know, the quiet institutions that hold ancient texts and satellite data alike, recognize the pattern but choose to maintain silence to prevent chaos? Or have they, too, forgotten what their predecessors once guarded? If there truly was an age before ours, one that mastered the interplay of energy, sound, and matter, then the fragments we rediscover, pyramids, megaliths, sacred geometry, are not monuments but messages. Perhaps they are reminders left for the next civilization, carved in materials that outlast flame and flood. A voice from the past saying, "Remember, prepare, do not make the same mistake again." But we rarely listen to stone. We build new towers of Babel, digital, synthetic, global, and call it progress. We trade myth for data, yet both can deceive. We have learned to measure the stars, but not to hear their rhythm. The ancients warned that power without harmony invites destruction. And maybe that is the final secret buried beneath the sands. Not that knowledge was lost, but that it was surrendered because we proved unworthy to hold it. Still, the ruins wait, their silence not hopeless but patient. Somewhere, under ocean sediment or glacial ice, perhaps an archive endures, of machines, of languages, of maps that describe a world erased. And when we are ready, when curiosity outweighs fear, it may rise again. The truth cannot be destroyed, only delayed. Until then, the forbidden past remains half awake in our collective dream. It surfaces in myths, in intuition, in déjà vu, each a whisper from the civilizations that came before. They ask us not for belief, but for remembrance, for only when we remember will we understand that the story of humanity is not a ladder, but a wheel, turning endlessly between forgetting and awakening. And so the question remains, echoing across time like a forgotten mantra. What happens when the wheel turns again? There comes a point when the question is no longer what was hidden, but why was it hidden so well? The deeper one traces the fault lines of forgotten history, the clearer it becomes that humanity's amnesia was not random. There is a pattern, subtle but undeniable, of suppression, redirection, and substitution. The symbols of the old world were not erased. They were repurposed, hollowed out, and draped in new meaning. Ancient gods became saints, cosmic temples became churches, and celestial maps became sacred geometry hidden in plain sight. It was not destruction. It was translation, a deliberate rewriting of memory so complete that the world forgot it was rewritten at all. When Christianity spread across Europe, it built its cathedrals upon pagan sites of power. The Vatican itself stands upon an ancient necropolis once dedicated to Mithras, the god of light reborn from stone. The cross, long before it was a symbol of crucifixion, represented the intersection of heaven and earth, the four directions of cosmic order. The halo that crowns saints mirrors the solar discs of Egypt. Even the ritual of communion, bread and wine, echoes the Egyptian sacrament of Osiris and the grain of resurrection. These echoes are not coincidence. They are the residues of older knowledge reframed to fit new orthodoxy. The faiths that conquered the ancient world did not destroy its symbols. They absorbed them, ensuring continuity while controlling interpretation. Beneath the frescoes and stained glass, the architecture of these cathedrals hides the same geometry found in Giza and Delphi. The nave forms a perfect ratio of harmonic resonance. The rose windows encode the mathematics of planetary motion. To the faithful, these are mere designs of beauty. To the initiated, they are remnants of a sacred technology, one that used sound, light, and proportion to elevate consciousness. When the Church outlawed the study of geometry and alchemy as heresy, it was not superstition they feared, but rediscovery. The architects of faith were also architects of memory. This act of cultural camouflage extended beyond religion. The Roman Empire, inheriting fragments of Egyptian and Greek wisdom, converted temples into monuments of state. Knowledge once guarded by priest-scientists became the property of emperors. Astrology became propaganda. Cosmology became politics. The celestial was chained to the terrestrial, and the empire declared itself divine. After Rome's fall, this legacy was passed like contraband through secret orders and monastic cells. The Templars, the Cathars, the Sufis, the alchemists of Prague, all carrying the same ember through the long darkness of dogma. Each group whispered the same thing in its own language. The true history of humanity is written in the stars, not in the scriptures. And yet, each time this truth threatened to ignite, it was extinguished. The Templars were burned, their secrets seized. The Gnostics were hunted, their texts buried in jars at Nag Hammadi. The Hermetic philosophers were silenced as heretics. The pattern was not moral outrage, it was containment. For what they taught was liberation. That divinity is not external, but within. That the gods were not beings, but principles of nature and consciousness. that humanity was once capable of harnessing forces now deemed impossible. The suppression of this knowledge ensured dependence on priest, ruler, institution. Freedom was replaced with faith. Even the Renaissance, hailed as the rebirth of knowledge, was a managed awakening. The rediscovery of Plato, Pythagoras, and the Hermetica did not dismantle the hierarchy. It refined it. The same families that financed cathedrals financed the rediscovery of lost science, not to liberate humanity but to monopolize it. The Medici, the Borgias, later the banking dynasties of Europe, all traced their wealth to both faith and secrecy. The age of religion transformed into the age of reason, but the structure of control remained. The temples became universities. The robes became lab coats. The dogma changed its language, but not its purpose. In the shadows of these transitions, another world endured, a world of symbols and ciphers. Hidden societies continued the work of remembering. The Rosicrucians spoke of invisible colleges, custodians of ancient wisdom waiting for humanity to mature. The Freemasons embedded the geometry of Solomon's Temple into modern architecture, preserving sacred ratios beneath the facades of parliament buildings and financial capitals. The very grid of Washington, D.C., designed by L'Enfant and Jefferson, mirrors Masonic geometry rooted in Egyptian measure. The obelisk, once a solar antenna to Ra, now stands as a monument to power, its true purpose forgotten, its energy drained of meaning. But memory cannot be erased completely. It leaks through culture, through art, through the subconscious of humanity itself. Leonardo da Vinci painted hidden symmetries in the folds of fabric. Michelangelo encoded anatomical knowledge within the Sistine Chapel. Shakespeare veiled hermetic truths within his plays. Even music, Bach's fugues, Mozart's harmonics, carries resonance patterns that echo Pythagorean cosmology. The arts became the final sanctuary of forbidden science, where truth could hide in beauty. And then came the Industrial Age, a new flood, this time not of water but of iron, smoke, and noise. The machine replaced the temple. The sacred became mechanical, measurable, and monetized. Electricity, magnetism, and sound, the same forces that once built monuments, were rediscovered but stripped of meaning. Technology became progress, but progress without wisdom is amnesia. The world learned to harness power, but forgot why it was sacred. The resonance that once aligned the human spirit with the cosmos became a signal lost in static. Yet the old knowledge still calls from beneath the circuitry. In quantum physics, the language of vibration reappears. String theory suggests that all matter is frequency. Consciousness research flirts once more with the idea that reality is participatory, that thought shapes form, the very essence of ancient cosmology. What modern science calls discovery, the ancients might have called remembrance. Perhaps we are not advancing, but recovering. Perhaps every telescope pointed at the stars is a subconscious attempt to remember where we came from. Still, one cannot help but wonder, if we are remembering, why does resistance persist? Why do governments still classify archaeological finds? And why do institutions still ridicule alternative history? Could it be that the machinery of suppression never vanished? It only evolved? In an age of global communication, control no longer requires burning libraries. It requires flooding the mind. Disinformation, distraction, and endless novelty ensure that no one truth can take root long enough to awaken. The Internet, the greatest archive ever created, is also the greatest labyrinth. The more we know, the less we understand. The past dissolves into trivia, the present into noise, but the signal remains for those who listen. It hums beneath the static, in the patterns of sacred geometry, in the alignments of ancient architecture, in the myths that refuse to die. There are still those who study the old harmonics, who trace ley lines across continents, who measure temple resonances and find frequencies identical to the Schumann resonance of Earth. They are mocked, yet persistent, for they sense what the ancients knew, that knowledge is not stored in books but in vibration, that the planet itself is a library waiting to be read. If humanity ever unlocks that resonance again, if it learns to hear the frequency of its own origin, everything will change. Religion will lose its monopoly on meaning, science its monopoly on truth. Power will return to where it began, within. That is why the past remains forbidden. Because the moment we remember what the ancients truly knew, the systems that feed on forgetfulness will collapse. Perhaps that is the cycle itself, the eternal dance between revelation and suppression. Every age reaches a threshold where memory threatens to awaken, and every age chooses either enlightenment or amnesia. The last civilization may have chosen silence. The question is, what will we choose when the pattern repeats? The temples are still aligned, the geometry still sings, the stones still hum beneath our feet, waiting for resonance. Perhaps history is not calling us to worship the past, but to finish what it began, to reclaim harmony before the next fall. For the wheel of forgetting is turning once more, and the whisper grows louder with every revolution. Remember what was buried, or become buried yourself. Every age believes it is awake, yet each lives within its own dream. The ancients dreamed of gods descending from the stars. We dream of machines ascending into consciousness. But beneath both lies the same desire, to touch what was lost, to reclaim the memory that pulses like a heartbeat beneath the crust of time. The forgotten past does not remain buried. It vibrates in our collective imagination, surfacing through art, intuition, and obsession. Each generation rediscovers fragments of the same truth and mistakes them for invention. In this sense, progress is not creation, but recollection. Civilization endlessly remembering what it keeps forgetting. The stories of forbidden knowledge have always carried the same warning, that to uncover what was hidden is to risk repeating the same fall. In Sumer, the gods punished humanity for seeking immortality. In Greece, Prometheus was bound for bringing fire to man. In Genesis, Adam and Eve were cast out for eating the fruit of knowledge. Across every myth, wisdom and exile are twins. Perhaps this is not moral caution, but encoded memory, a warning from a time when humanity's mastery over nature led to its undoing. A time when the forces once harmonized became weapons, and the earth itself turned against its makers. Some traces of that power remain, scattered across the world like the ruins of a forgotten experiment. The vitrified fortresses of Scotland and India, whose stones melted as if under atomic heat. The mysterious glass plains of the Libyan desert, whose formation requires temperatures equal to a nuclear blast. The Sanskrit texts of the Mahabharata speak of flying machines, vimanas, unleashing lances of light brighter than 1,000 suns. Mainstream historians label these passages metaphorical, yet they echo with eerie familiarity in an age that has already witnessed the mushroom cloud. Perhaps humanity has walked this path before, and each time, the memory of its own destruction became myth, softened by fear and time. If such a cycle exists, then our modern age is its latest turning. We have rediscovered energy, vibration, and atomic resonance, the same forces once veiled in allegory. The difference is not what we know, but how we use it. The ancients sought harmony. We seek control. Our machines imitate nature but do not understand it. Our science dissects, categorizes, and isolates, while the wisdom of the ancients integrated and revered. Where they built temples aligned to stars, we build towers that block the sky. Where they honored the resonance between human and cosmos, we flood the air with artificial frequencies that numb perception. The forgetting continues, disguised as advancement. And yet, the earth remembers. In moments of geological upheaval, ancient memories seem to resurface. In 1994, researchers drilling into Antarctic ice discovered microfossils of tropical life, evidence that the continent once basked under sunlight. Magnetic analysis revealed that the poles have shifted repeatedly, flipping the planet's orientation in catastrophic bursts. What would such upheaval look like to those who lived through it? A flood of fire, a deluge of darkness, a sudden shift of heavens. To them, the gods would have seemed wrathful. To us, it would be physics. The same event, two interpretations, myth and science separated only by language. The deeper question is whether such cataclysms are natural or engineered. Ancient myths speak not only of gods who ruled, but of wars among them. Wars fought in the skies, leaving scars upon the earth. Could those tales be distorted memories of conflicts waged with forgotten technologies? The crater fields of India, the radioactive deserts of Central Asia, the unexplained isotopic anomalies beneath ancient sites, they suggest an event beyond coincidence. If humanity once reached a level of mastery capable of reshaping matter itself, then perhaps the gods of myth were not supernatural beings but our own ancestors, those who learned too much too fast. The pattern of suppression, then, may not be mere conspiracy, but cosmic necessity. To prevent recurrence, each cycle buries its own memory. The survivors carry fragments in myth and ritual, stripped of dangerous context. The flood becomes moral allegory. The temple becomes church. The science becomes miracle. By the time the next age rises, the warning is forgotten, and the experiment begins anew. This is the curse of a species trapped between remembrance and amnesia, forever rebuilding the same tower, forever watching it fall. Even so, there are moments when the veil thins, when forgotten knowledge seems to stir beneath the surface of collective consciousness. The 20th century saw the rediscovery of quantum physics, consciousness research, and sacred geometry, all echoes of the same idea, that reality is not material but vibrational. Energy, frequency, and form are not separate. They are different expressions of the same underlying rhythm. The ancients called it logos, om, mat, tau. We call it field theory. We are circling back to what we once knew, that the universe is not a machine, but a song. And yet, even as science touches the threshold of metaphysics, it recoils. To admit consciousness as fundamental would dismantle the mechanistic worldview upon which modern institutions depend. Universities would crumble into philosophy. Religions would dissolve into experience. The distinction between observer and observed, the foundation of control, would vanish. Thus, we are allowed to approach the edge, but never to cross. Every age guards its own illusion of certainty, and ours is no different. We worship data as the ancients worshipped idols, mistaking precision for truth. Still, the forbidden past calls to us, not as nostalgia, but as unfinished work. The monuments that defy explanation may not be relics, but instructions. The pyramids, the ziggurats, the stone circles, all are aligned to celestial events that repeat over vast cycles, as if marking time not in years, but in ages. Perhaps they were designed as beacons for the next rise, guiding survivors toward rediscovery. Their builders may have known that knowledge could not be preserved in text or speech, only in stone geometry resilient to flood and fire. If so, the monuments are not tombs, they are messages. And like any message, they await interpretation. Modern scholars debate alignment and construction techniques, but few ask the simplest question: why? Why did so many ancient cultures pour unimaginable effort into encoding cosmic information in structures meant to outlast their own civilizations? What were they trying to tell us? Perhaps that the true catastrophe was not the flood, but the forgetting that followed. Perhaps they understood that civilizations die not when they fall, but when they lose memory of who they were. This forgetting is not only historical, it is personal. Each human life reenacts the same amnesia. We are born remembering everything, then forget. As children, we dream of worlds we have never seen. As adults, we dismiss them as imagination. The collective mirrors the individual. Humanity, too, dreams of its own forgotten childhood, its golden age, then wakes into disbelief. But every dream leaves residue. The myths, the mysteries, the anomalies. Together they form a kind of genetic memory of civilization itself, a code that will keep rewriting until we are ready to read it. To awaken that memory requires courage, for the truth it reveals is not comforting. It tells us that we are not the beginning, but the continuation. That our gods were our ancestors, our myths their warnings. That history, as we know it, is the amnesiac fragment of a far longer story, one in which humanity oscillates between creation and destruction, remembering and forgetting. Each time we approach enlightenment, we reach too far and fall. Each time we fall, we begin again, believing we are the first. But perhaps this cycle is not punishment. It is initiation. Each fall refines us. Each forgetting burns away arrogance. Each rediscovery brings us closer to balance. Maybe the ancients did not want to save us from the cycle, but to teach us how to move within it consciously. Their temples may not be remnants of failure, but blueprints for transcendence. Reminders that the universe itself breathes in rhythm, expanding and contracting, remembering and erasing, just as we do. If this is true, then the hidden past is not just history, it is prophecy. The same forces that erased the last world are stirring again. Climate shifts, magnetic anomalies, societal collapse. The cycle turns, indifferent yet precise. But unlike the ancients, we have global awareness, technology, and a faint memory of their warnings. The question is whether we will use these gifts to harmonize with the coming change, or to resist it and repeat their fate. The forbidden truths whisper from every ruin. The earth will remember even if we do not. The stars will realign, the oceans will rise, and once again humanity will face the test it has failed so many times before, whether to awaken or to vanish. And so the question grows heavier with each generation. When the next flood comes, will we finally remember, or will the gods of memory bury us again? In the faint hum of the modern world, beneath the noise of cities and the glow of screens, there is a deeper resonance, one that feels older than memory itself. It vibrates through us like an echo from a vanished age, a frequency we have forgotten how to hear. For all our progress, humanity remains haunted by absence, the missing pages of its own story. The further we advance, the more that silence beneath our feet begins to feel deliberate. The traces of lost epochs are no longer isolated curiosities. They form a pattern, one that points toward an unsettling truth. We are not the first to reach this height. And if history repeats, we may not be the last to fall. Everywhere we look, the signs of an earlier intelligence wait in plain sight, misinterpreted or ignored. The basalt statues of Easter Island, half buried and eroded, stare inland toward something we can no longer name. Beneath them lie quarries with precision-cut platforms, evidence of engineering unknown to the islanders encountered by Europeans. Across the world, the same mystery repeats. Places where architecture exceeds the culture it's credited to, as though a vanished hand left its mark before retreating into myth. In Lebanon, the trilithon stones of Baalbek, each over 1,000 tons, sit beneath Roman temples that cannot explain them. In Peru, the blocks of Sacsayhuaman interlock with mathematical perfection, their angles defying erosion and earthquake alike. Every ruin is a riddle, and every riddle suggests a missing teacher. For centuries, scholars have patched over these anomalies with the language of coincidence and improvisation. They say the ancients built what they could with what they had. Yet their explanations collapse under the weight of precision. The question is no longer whether these monuments were possible, but why they exist at all. Why did humanity's earliest builders work with such impossible ambition? Why create structures that would outlast every generation, as if they were not building for themselves, but for us, for someone far in the future who would need to remember? In the dark corridors of forgotten temples, the answer still lingers in geometry and symbol. The ancients did not separate science from spirituality. They saw the universe as a single living organism, every vibration a heartbeat of creation. Architecture was a mirror of the cosmos, built not to dominate nature but to converse with it. Their pyramids, ziggurats, and stone circles were instruments of resonance, amplifiers of the Earth's energy, bridges between frequencies of matter and spirit. This worldview, once universal, was later dismantled piece by empires that rose in its aftermath. To rule, they first had to erase the memory that power could exist without hierarchy. The Church called such knowledge pagan. Science later called it superstition. But what if both labels served the same purpose, to contain the uncontainable? To keep humanity's perception locked between faith and logic, forever divided, forever manageable. The ancients did not see division. They saw continuity. The star was not separate from the stone, nor the human from the planet. To remember that unity is to dissolve every structure built upon separation, economy, empire, even religion itself. Perhaps that is why the ancient worldview had to be buried, not because it was false, but because it was free. Yet traces of it survived in the margins of culture. The Hermetic maxim, as above, so below, is not poetry. It is physics. It describes the fractal nature of the cosmos, where patterns repeat across scales from galaxy to atom. Ancient sages encoded this principle in the flower of life, a geometric lattice carved into temple walls from Egypt to China. Modern science rediscovers it through quantum entanglement, the web connecting every particle to every other. What physicists call the unified field, the ancients called spirit. The language differs. The truth does not. Still, to rediscover that unity would upend everything we know. The machinery of civilization, its politics, its institutions, its illusions of progress, depends on separation. Human from earth, mind from matter, spirit from science. Reuniting them would not just rewrite history, it would rewrite reality itself. For centuries, those who have glimpsed this unity have been silenced or dismissed. Giordano Bruno, burned for saying stars are suns with their own worlds. Wilhelm Reich, imprisoned for discovering life energy. Nikola Tesla, erased for touching the wireless fabric of the planet. Every age produces its heretics, and every heretic speaks the same forbidden truth, that power flows freely through all creation, and no authority can own it. Perhaps this is why the ancient world left its knowledge in riddles rather than instructions. Symbols cannot be burned, geometry cannot be censored. A pyramid is both monument and equation. Its shape encodes P, F, and the speed of light, constants that bridge the material and the cosmic. The Sumerians wrote in myth, the Egyptians in proportion, the Greeks in allegory, each hiding universal laws in plain sight. What we call mysticism may simply be physics translated into the language of eternity. But even symbols decay when their readers forget the code. The Renaissance revived fragments of this lost wisdom, but by then it was already distorted. Alchemy became chemistry without soul, astrology became astronomy without meaning. We inherited the mechanisms, but not the understanding. And as technology advanced, our ability to destroy grew faster than our capacity to remember why we should not. The ancients may have warned of this imbalance in myth. Prometheus punished for fire, Atlantis drowned for pride, the Tower of Babel shattered by its own arrogance. Each story describes the same cycle, the ascent of knowledge without wisdom, followed by collapse. Today, that cycle nears its zenith once more. The global civilization that prides itself on data and design stands upon foundations it does not understand. We orbit satellites, yet ignore the celestial alignments that guided the ancients. We extract energy from the Earth, yet forget that imbalance invites correction. Climate change, species extinction, magnetic drift. These are not random crises. They are symptoms of dissonance. When resonance is broken, harmony demands resolution. The planet is not punishing us. It is recalibrating. And as it does, echoes of the last reset, the floods, the quakes, the fires, return as prophecy. There are those who sense this and seek to remember before it is too late. Independent researchers, archaeologists, and mystics gather fragments from the ruins, measuring, decoding, reconstructing the web of lost knowledge. Their voices are dismissed by academia, yet their discoveries keep multiplying. Submerged cities off India's coast, pyramid structures under Antarctic ice, star maps carved into prehistoric caves. Slowly, the forbidden narrative rebuilds itself. It suggests that humanity's story did not begin in one place, but everywhere at once, as if awakened by the same impulse, the same memory, scattered across continents. If that is true, then civilization is not a singular event, but a recurring phenomenon, rising like a tide each time consciousness matures enough to reorganize matter. The flood myths may not mark destruction, but transition, epochs ending so new ones can begin. The question is not whether another reset will come, but whether we will enter it as victims or as participants. The ancients may have survived their collapse by encoding knowledge in structures indestructible by time. We, however, build from glass and code, fragile things that vanish with a single solar flare or shift of magnetic poles. The warning stands. Knowledge not grounded in wisdom is dust. And yet, even amid collapse, something eternal stirs. The same force that built the pyramids builds quantum networks. The same geometry that shaped temples underpins the architecture of our DNA. The micro mirrors the macro. The human body hums with frequencies that match planetary harmonics, as if we are instruments within the Earth's orchestra. The ancients knew this and lived accordingly. Their rituals, chants, and meditations were not superstition. They were calibration. To be aligned was to survive the storm. Perhaps that is the final secret of the hidden past. Survival through resonance. Not through weapons or walls, but through harmony. If a civilization can align itself with the frequencies of Earth and cosmos, it may transcend the cycle of destruction. Its legacy would not be physical, but vibrational, an imprint in consciousness itself. Maybe that is why we feel déjà vu when we stand before ancient ruins, why certain melodies or patterns move us to tears. Somewhere deep within, we recognize them. They are us, remembering ourselves. But will we listen this time? Or will we once again trade wisdom for power, unity for control? The ancient cycle waits for our answer. The tide is already rising. The poles are already shifting. Whether we face another flood or another awakening depends not on fate, but on resonance, on whether we can remember the song before it ends. And so, the ruins whisper beneath the noise of modern life, their geometry vibrating faintly through the centuries. Remember who you were before the forgetting began. The deeper one studies the fragments of the ancient world, the more a strange intuition begins to take shape. A quiet sense that the forgotten past is not behind us at all. It is beneath us, folded into the present like a shadow under sunlight, waiting for the right vibration to make itself known again. History, it seems, is not a line but a spiral, and we are circling ever closer to where it began. Every monument, every myth, every forbidden symbol that survives feels less like a relic and more like a signal, an encoded transmission from those who lived before the last reset, left for those who would rise after. What if the ancients knew that memory fades faster than stone, that language can be distorted, that institutions will always rewrite what threatens them? What if they built not for worship, but for remembrance? The Great Pyramid may not be a tomb at all, but a message inscribed in mathematics, a model of the Earth's curvature, a chronometer of celestial cycles, a geometric code that survives flood, fire, and empire alike. It was not meant to be believed. It was meant to be rediscovered. Each age that finds it must decide whether to see it as a wonder or as a warning. In 1997, researchers discovered that the pyramid's base is aligned not to true north as defined by modern mapping, but to the actual rotational axis of the planet, a level of precision achievable only with advanced astronomical knowledge. Its height and perimeter encode the ratio of P and the golden mean, while its latitude matches exactly the speed of light in meters per second. Coincidence, say the skeptics. But how many coincidences does it take before a pattern becomes intention? When a monument built more than 4,000 years ago mirrors constants that would not be measured until the 19th century, the question of how is less important than the deeper why. Similar codes appear across the globe, repeating as if composed by a single intelligence. The temples of Angkor mirror the Draco constellation. Teotihuacan's layout reflects the orbital ratios of Mercury, Venus, and Earth. Even the mysterious circular mounds of Ohio align with lunar standstills, only calculable through generations of precise observation. It is as if the planet itself was once treated as a laboratory, a resonant field tuned to cosmic frequencies. The builders were not competing. They were collaborating across continents, guided by a shared understanding we have since dismantled and replaced with separation. Modern science glimpses pieces of what the ancients may have taken for granted. Physicists speak of quantum entanglement and the holographic principle, the idea that all information in the universe is interconnected. Neuroscience whispers that consciousness is not confined to the brain, but entangled with the very fabric of reality. Mystics said as much thousands of years ago, that the human spirit is the microcosm of the cosmos, and that what is above is also within. Perhaps the greatest secret buried beneath history is not alien intervention or lost technology, but the realization that consciousness itself was once understood as the true engine of creation. If so, then our fall was not from grace, but from awareness. The cataclysms that reset civilization may have been physical, but the deeper extinction was mental, a collapse of connection between humanity and the living field of the earth. When that resonance broke, memory shattered. The survivors rebuilt with fragments, myths of gods, rituals of sound, alignments of stone. They remembered enough to echo, but not enough to explain. Over time, the echoes became religions, and the science of consciousness turned into worship. The same truth that once freed humanity became the foundation of its captivity. Yet the cycles always return. In the early 20th century, subtle reawakenings began to stir. Quantum theory began to sound suspiciously like metaphysics. Jung spoke of archetypes and collective memory, the same patterns the ancients carved into temples and zodiacs. Einstein described the universe as vibration condensed into matter, echoing the Vedic hymn. Nada Brahma, the world is sound. Slowly, reluctantly, science circles back towards the forgotten truth that reality is relational, not absolute. The ancients did not wait for proof. They built their civilizations upon it. And still, the question remains, who taught them? The mainstream story insists that civilization evolved independently, yet the uniformity of these cosmic correspondences implies something else, either a global communication long before recorded history, or a shared inheritance from a source now erased. Whether that source was terrestrial or celestial is a matter of debate. But the world's oldest texts speak of the same moment, a first time, a golden age, when knowledge came from the sky. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, the Egyptians the Neteru, the Greeks the Titans. Different names, same archetype, beings who bestowed knowledge, then withdrew, leaving their symbols as keys for those who would later seek. If these were metaphors, why did the ancients encode them with such technical precision? Why depict star maps and orbital mechanics alongside their myths? And why, when we finally developed the tools to understand them, did our institutions rush to dismiss the implications? It seems almost reflexive, this fear of connection, this insistence that humanity must remain isolated within its own timeline. Yet, isolation is the greatest illusion of all. The hidden past challenges that illusion by revealing a deeper continuity, that life, intelligence, and consciousness are not local accidents but universal expressions. If ancient civilizations once tapped into this truth, then they were not primitive, but ahead of us, capable of engineering harmony instead of conquest. What they left behind may be more than ruins. It may be instructions for surviving the next cycle. For every myth of destruction ends not with extinction, but rebirth. The flood cleanses, the fire purifies, the silence resets the stage, and always the memory returns in dreams, in intuition, in the magnetic pull we feel towards the ruins. Perhaps that is why our era feels both new and ancient. Our technology replicates the same principles once embodied in myth. We communicate through invisible frequencies, manipulate energy with intention, and build machines that mirror the mind. We are becoming again what we once were, creators of worlds within worlds. But without wisdom, the pattern will repeat. The ancients warned of hubris not because they feared progress, but because they remembered the cost. Every civilization that forgets its harmony with the cosmos eventually implodes under its own noise. And yet, within that warning lies hope. If the past is cyclical, so is awakening. The same forces that buried truth can resurrect it. The flood may wash away memory, but the seed of remembrance is never lost. It sleeps in the human spirit, waiting for resonance. Perhaps the rediscovery of ancient knowledge in our time is no accident. Perhaps the cycle of forgetting is breaking, and the veiled wisdom of our ancestors is rising again, this time through the very medium once used to suppress it. Global connection. Information, once hoarded, now flows freely. The keepers of secrecy have lost their monopoly. What remains is discernment, to separate noise from signal, illusion from inheritance. For in the end, the forbidden truth is not about lost civilizations, gods, or alien architects. It is about us. It is the recognition that the same consciousness that carved the megaliths, charted the stars, and survived the floods still looks through our eyes today. We are the ancients, amnesiacs playing gods once more. And the ruins we study are not merely of stone. They are mirrors, reflecting what we could be if we remember. The cycle continues. The question is whether this time we will carry the memory forward, or once again let it drown beneath the tide. The monuments stand in silence, but they are not asleep. They are waiting, patient as time itself, for the moment when humanity finally looks upon them not as mysteries to decode, but as messages to embody. And perhaps that is the true secret of the hidden past, that it was never lost at all. It has always been within us, waiting for recognition. The ancients may have built in stone, but what they meant to awaken was spirit. The moment we remember that, history itself will no longer need to hide. There is a strange feeling that settles over those who walk among the ruins of forgotten worlds, a sensation both intimate and immense, as though the stones themselves are trying to speak. It is not nostalgia, not awe, but a kind of recognition. Something in the body remembers what the mind has been taught to forget. The curvature of a pillar, the rhythm of carved spirals, the alignment of sunlight across a corridor at dawn, they all seem to whisper the same thing. We have been here before, and if that is true, then the story of humanity is not one of progress, but of recovery, of fragments returning to themselves after an age of silence. The archaeologist uncovers shards of pottery and sees culture, The geologist sees erosion and sees time. But somewhere between those disciplines lies a field unacknowledged, the archaeology of memory. Beneath each discovery lies an older one, invisible but undeniable, a continuity of purpose stretching across continents and millennia. Whether in Sumerian ziggurats, Mayan observatories, or Celtic mounds, the message is constant. Humanity once lived in synchronization with the cosmos. The temples aligned not just to stars, but to frequencies, seasons, and consciousness itself. We were once part of a vast symphony, not its audience. But the music ended. Or perhaps it was silenced. The ancient texts tell of floods and fires, of towers falling and skies darkening, of gods departing and knowledge sealed away. Mainstream history interprets these as allegories for natural disaster or cultural decline. Yet what if they describe something more deliberate, a planetary reboot designed to erase a dangerous memory? If ancient humanity truly harnessed forces we are only beginning to rediscover, energy, sound, consciousness, then perhaps their destruction was not punishment, but containment. A firewall between what was and what might be again. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists discovered skeletons fused into the streets, their bodies emitting radiation levels comparable to Hiroshima. The site bears no evidence of volcanic activity, no signs of conventional warfare. It stands as a silent anomaly, unexplainable, except through the lens of catastrophe too advanced to fit the timeline. In other regions, layers of fused sand, desert glass, stretch for miles, created by temperatures high enough to melt quartz. Mainstream science calls these meteor impacts, but there are no corresponding craters, no physical cause that fits neatly. What if these are the remnants of technologies lost to myth? Machines of resonance or light capable of altering matter itself? What if the flood was not just water, but energy, an electromagnetic deluge that erased everything it touched? When the survivors emerged, they would have been children again, bereft of context, surrounded by relics they could no longer operate. To them, the lights of the past would have seemed divine, the machines of their ancestors, the chariots of gods, and so they worshipped what they once created. Their myths became memories scaffolding, holding together a knowledge too vast to carry consciously. Over generations, those myths hardened into religion, and religion hardened into history. The keepers of power learned to control the story, to decide which fragments of the old truth would be sanctified and which would be buried. What began as trauma became tradition. Yet the trauma never healed. It lingers in every civilization's myth of exile, in every yearning for paradise lost. The Garden of Eden, the Golden Age, Atlantis, different names for the same ache. We feel it even now, in our fascination with the stars, in our obsession with apocalypse. We sense that something is missing, that progress without origin is hollow. The skyscraper is the pyramid's descendant, the satellite the ziggurat reborn. But stripped of spirit, these achievements feel weightless, as if built atop unacknowledged grief. Humanity is advancing technologically but regressing existentially. We know how to split atoms, yet we no longer remember how to align with the pulse of the planet. Perhaps that is why the ancients built for eternity. They knew the cycle would return. They knew that one day, when memory had faded and arrogance had taken root again, their stones would still stand, silent witnesses to the last time humanity played with forces beyond its understanding. The geometry of Giza, the sonic architecture of Malta, the crystalline alignments of Angkor, all may have been designed to survive not just time, but forgetting. They are the memory of Earth itself, waiting for us to listen. In recent years, scientists have begun to rediscover what these monuments always implied. Studies in cymatics show that sound can arrange matter into precise geometric patterns. Experiments in quantum entanglement demonstrate instantaneous communication across distance. The same principles once hidden in temples are now emerging in laboratories, as though the universe itself is re-teaching us what we lost. Even DNA, when observed through the lens of vibration, reveals harmonic ratios identical to those encoded in ancient architecture. The microcosm mirrors the macrocosm. The song was never gone. We simply forgot the melody. Still, something resists this remembering. Every time knowledge edges toward unity, when physics meets consciousness, when archaeology meets myth, the gatekeepers appear, invoking skepticism not as inquiry but as defense. The ridicule mechanism, perfected over centuries, activates instantly. Fringe, pseudoscience, mythology. These words function as spells of dismissal, ensuring that the forbidden remains invisible. The greatest illusion of modernity is not disbelief, but selective belief. We accept anything that affirms progress and reject anything that suggests we've been here before. But truth doesn't depend on permission. It persists like resonance through the ages, waiting for the right frequency to awaken. It appears in dreams, in synchronicities, in the inexplicable sense that history is thinner than it seems. We feel it when we stand before an ancient site and experience vertigo. Not of height, but of depth. Time folds, and for a moment the illusion of separation dissolves. We are no longer visitors, we are witnesses returning. The past stares back through the present, asking only that we remember what we once knew. And what we once knew, above all, was that consciousness is the true architecture of reality. The ancients built in stone because they understood that form anchors energy, that intention becomes matter. Their monuments are frozen prayers, their mathematics a language of creation. If humanity remembered this, not as belief but as practice, our civilization would transform overnight. Energy scarcity, war, environmental collapse, all are symptoms of disconnection. To heal the world, we must first rejoin it. The ancients did not worship nature, they were nature. That was their power and their undoing. It may soon be ours again, for the same signs that marked their fall now echo in our skies. Magnetic poles drift, storms grow wild, the sun behaves unpredictably. The earth hums louder, its resonance shifting as if preparing for renewal. We call it climate change, but perhaps it is something deeper. The planet recalibrating to cleanse the noise. In myth, this moment is always the threshold, when humanity must decide whether to ascend through harmony or fall through hubris. The cycle is not punishment, it is invitation. The ancients left us every clue to choose correctly. The ratio of the Great Pyramid encodes not only geometry, but balance. The myths of flood and fire warn of imbalance. The sacred texts, when read symbolically, are not stories of sin, but of dissonance. Reminders that when humanity forgets its connection to the cosmos, the universe resets the equation. We are at that edge again. Whether we dissolve or evolve depends on memory. And so the question deepens, pressing against the veil of modern certainty. What if the end we fear is not destruction, but disclosure? What if apocalypse, The Greek apocalypsis simply means unveiling. The unveiling of what has always been hidden. That we are the continuation of a story older than the stars and the authors of its next chapter. Perhaps that is why, despite all the distractions of the modern world, so many still feel drawn to the mysteries, the pyramids, the megaliths, the myths. It is not curiosity, it is homesickness. Somewhere within, we remember. And that memory is not just a key to the past, it is a compass for the future. For the hidden truth of humanity is not that our ancestors were gods, but that they remembered how to live as if they were part of the divine. We have forgotten that unity, but the stones have not. They wait, as they always have, for the moment when our frequency matches theirs once more. And when that happens, when the forgotten melody hums again across the earth, perhaps history will no longer be a cycle of loss and rediscovery. Perhaps, at last, we will step out of the spiral and into harmony. The ruins will cease to be ruins, the forbidden will cease to be forbidden, and the truth, long hidden beneath layers of myth, empire, and denial, will rise not from the ground, but from within. The ancients did not vanish. They became us. And now, through us, they are trying to remember themselves. At the edge of history, where time dissolves into myth, something stirs, an awakening, faint yet unstoppable. It is not a revolution of machines or nations, but of memory. Humanity stands again at the same precipice it has faced before. The threshold between remembering and forgetting, between wisdom and ruin. We have built our towers, mapped the stars, split the atom, and reached beyond the sky. But in doing so, we have become estranged from the very rhythm that once guided the ancients. The earth hums, the stars shift, and the old cycle turns once more. The question is no longer what was lost, but what will be remembered in time. Across every continent, whispers of the same realization emerge. In the deserts of Egypt, scanning technologies reveal chambers beneath the Sphinx, sealed since before recorded time. In the Himalayas, ancient manuscripts speak of sky people who descended during a time of forgetting. In South America, geoglyphs stretch for miles, visible only from above, as though carved for eyes that once watched from the heavens. The pattern is unmistakable. Every civilization has left behind a map, and every map points not to geography, but to consciousness itself. The ancients did not build monuments to gods. They built mirrors for humanity. They foresaw that each age would forget, and in forgetting, would need reminders carved in stone. We have mistaken those reminders for relics. We call them myths, marvels, anomalies. But perhaps they are messages, encoded blueprints of how to survive the next turning of the wheel. The ancients seemed to understand that history is not progress, but recurrence. That the universe breathes in cycles of awakening and amnesia, creation and collapse. And within that rhythm, humanity's role is not mastery, but harmony. They warned us, the moment we try to dominate the cosmos rather than align with it, the song breaks and the reset begins. The reset has many names: the flood, the fire, the great forgetting. Its signs are everywhere: rising seas, shifting poles, the quiet unraveling of certainty. Yet even now, the same instinct that once built pyramids and observatories drives us forward. We feel the pulse of something greater calling from beyond logic. Our technologies echo the ancient sciences we denied: resonance, vibration, frequency. We rediscover through machines what our ancestors knew through consciousness. Quantum physics now describes entanglement where mystics once spoke of unity. Neuroscience hints at the holographic nature of the mind where sages once described the soul. The two paths, the scientific and the spiritual, curve toward convergence once again. But convergence is dangerous for those who depend on division. The keepers of modern orthodoxy, be they academic, religious, or economic, still guard the gates of truth. They cannot allow memory to awaken too quickly, for to remember is to become ungovernable. The moment humanity realizes that power does not descend from heaven or government, but rises from awareness itself, the structure collapses. That is why knowledge has always been forbidden, and why every rediscovery of the past meets resistance. The suppression is not ancient, it is perpetual. The past is not hidden because it is unprovable, but because it is empowering. And yet, suppression is futile. The truth leaks through the cracks of the present like light through stone. It emerges in synchronicities, in forgotten texts unearthed by chance, in visions, in dreams. Every individual who begins to question the narrative becomes a cell of awakening, a spark in the collective field. The more we remember, the more the vibration rises, and the more the old systems tremble. It is not rebellion that threatens them, but resonance. The real revolution is frequency. Somewhere, perhaps deep under the sands or the seas, remnants of the last world still rest. Libraries of crystal and metal, archives of sound and light. Legends speak of such places, the Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx, the sunken archives of Atlantis, the vaults of Thoth. Whether literal or symbolic, their existence points to a truth larger than either archaeology or faith. Humanity is not the author of its story. It is the reader, rediscovering chapters erased by time. And like all great stories, this one begins again where it ended, at the threshold of remembrance. Consider the uncanny synchronicity of our age. We communicate instantly across the planet as if the human network were a nervous system reactivating itself. We explore consciousness through technology, build artificial intelligence in our image, and simulate realities that mirror creation itself. The boundary between creator and created blurs. In myth, this was the moment of reckoning, the instant when the gods realized their reflection could think. And in every age before, it ended the same way, with awe and with fear. But what if this time the outcome is different? What if, instead of destroying ourselves through ignorance or arrogance, we remember what the ancients tried to teach, that creation responds to consciousness, and consciousness thrives in harmony? If civilization learns that it is not separate from the living field of the earth, the pattern could shift. The flood would become renewal, not erasure. The veil would thin, not close. We would step into a new era not as children of chaos, but as custodians of balance. For that to happen, we must first see the world as the ancients saw it, not as an object to control, but as a being to commune with. Every mountain, river, and star was once regarded as alive, each vibrating at a frequency connected to our own. The rituals and architectures of the old world were designed to maintain that balance. What we now call superstition was, in truth, calibration. When humanity stopped listening to the rhythm of nature, the harmony collapsed. The earth does not punish, it corrects. The storms, the tremors, the fires, they are not vengeance but reminders. The planet remembers, even when we do not. In every age, there have been those who tried to keep the memory alive. The keepers of the flame, The Watchers, the hidden schools, they encoded their knowledge in art, in symbol, in story, safe from literal minds that would burn what they could not control. Every myth is a time capsule, every allegory a survival guide. The phoenix that dies in fire only to rise again is not just a metaphor, it is history repeating itself. We are the phoenix now, standing in the flame between worlds. As we awaken, the ancient blueprint reveals itself piece by piece. The geometry of temples, the harmonics of chants, the mathematics of stars, they all point toward one truth, that everything is connected through vibration, and that awareness is the tuning key. When humanity vibrates in fear, the world fractures. When it vibrates in harmony, reality itself reorganizes. This is not mysticism, it is resonance physics. The ancients built their societies around this principle. We build ours against it. That is why theirs endured in wisdom, even as they fell in stone, and why ours stands in structure, even as it empties in spirit. Yet hope endures, as it always does. For the same cycles that bring forgetting also bring awakening. The same flood that erases also reveals. And in this era of noise, perhaps the whisper is returning. The same whisper that moved the stones of Giza and stirred the waters of Sumer. Remember who you are. If the ancients could speak now, perhaps they would not warn us of destruction. Perhaps they would remind us of potential. That humanity's purpose was never to dominate, but to harmonize. That knowledge without reverence becomes weapon, and reverence without knowledge becomes stagnation. The balance lies in remembering both. They might tell us that the forbidden truths were never meant to stay forbidden, that their secrecy was a test, not a prison, that those who seek with pure intent will always find what was hidden, and maybe they already are finding it. In laboratories studying consciousness, in physicists decoding vibration, in explorers mapping the magnetic lines of the earth, in ordinary people who, standing beneath the stars, feel something stir, something ancient, patient, and familiar. We are the continuation of every forgotten civilization, the living memory of every lost age. The ancients did not vanish. They became us, and through us, they dream of completion. So perhaps this is not the end of the story, but its fulfillment. The forbidden truths were hidden not to punish humanity, but to protect it until it was ready. Now, at the turning of another cycle, the veil thins. The past and future fold into one. The question is no longer what happened before, but what will we do with what we now remember? Because the final revelation of the hidden past is simple and terrifying and beautiful all at once. There was never a separation between gods and men, between science and spirit, between creator and creation. The wall was an illusion built of fear. When it falls, the real history of the world will not be written in books, but lived through us. And when that happens, when memory floods back like dawn over forgotten continents, the world will change not through conquest, but through resonance. The ancients called it the return of the first time. Perhaps that time is not behind us, but beginning again, now.